Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 23rd level of the RPG Cave. I'm one of your hosts, the level 99 human archmage, Ryan Turfin, and I'm joined, as always, by the level 99 elf ranger, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing? It's been about a week and a half since the last time I saw you. How are you doing?
Been a while.
Listeners at home don't have no idea, though.
Right. I'm doing great. And I just want to, tell you how good of a champ you are of switching times around. I know I have a busy schedule. You have a busy schedule, but we're working it out. We're getting this recording in because I'm very excited about this episode.
Yeah, I mean, you, Garret, excited about this game that we're going to talk about today, the Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. Yes. I'm shocked that you would be excited about today's game. But before we get into the Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, of course, we got to do all the things here. We got to clear the dungeon of some pesky mobs. So, of course, folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways you can do to support us. Number one, you can subscribe to us on your podcast feed of choice, whether that's Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're on all the things, so check us out there. Also, you can leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and if you do, we will read it on the show. In addition to that, if you want to see a video version of this show that goes live every single Saturday morning over on YouTube, go to youtube.com/YumiCapri, like, subscribe, share with all your friends. If you subscribe, it tells you when we have a new video. So you never actually miss another chance to look at Garrett's exquisite jawline. There, I had to bring in the question.
The exquisite jawline.
The one that we weren't going to bring up, but I just had to bring it up anyways. And then last but not least, if you like what we do as well and you want early access to this show, as well as some exclusive content like an episode of the Yumi Capri podcast that we just recorded live from Toronto in person, head on over to patreon.com/Yumi Capri. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar and out comes content. So check us out there. Also, this is coming out with the week of Extra Life because this is coming out the week we're recording this. So we should also promote, Garret, that Extra Life is coming next week from the time people are listening to this. So I'm actually going to be doing two 12-hour streams. I'm not doing a full 24 hours in a row because I'm an old man. I can't deal with the full 24 hours. But I'm going to be doing my live streams on Wednesday and Thursday of this coming week. Cool. So you can come watch me play some RPGs over on youtube.com/YumiCapri. I'll be streaming there. And I'm going to play some old school RPGs. It's going to be RPGs the whole day. I also have a donation link in the description of this video as well. So if you would like to donate to Sick Kids, which is a group that helps hospitals here in Southwestern Ontario, the link is in the description as well. Garret, I know PSVG is doing a big push for Extra Life. I'm guessing you're busy this year and you're probably not doing Extra Life yourself, right?
This is the absolute worst time for me. Yeah. So I had to give up that Extra Life time this year, but I will definitely be attending Extra Life, donating whenever I can.
Well, no, but I'm going to shout out your PSVG patrons as well, because I think Kevin and a couple others are also doing it as well. So I'll have links for that in the show notes as well, because we want to support everyone over at PSVG as well. Since this is kind of like a crossover show in a lot of ways. Also, Sean's also going to be live in Rome, New York next weekend.
Jealous.
So I'm going to have all of the information for his stuff down below as well. So again, podcast description if you want to know what our plans are for Extra Life. And it's going to be a lot of fun this year, I think. So I'm excited to play a bunch of RPGs on camera for people. All right. Without further ado, Garret, it's time to read from the sacred texts. Because
the actual sacred texts,
or the Elder Scrolls, as one might say, because we're talking all about the Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. Of course, this was a long time coming, and we wanted to get this out around the time that the anniversary for Skyrim is coming up, because it is coming up. It's basically from the time people are listening to this, it's going to be about 2 weeks out from when this goes live, essentially. So,
cool.
It's happening, though. It's almost 10 years old. Can you believe that Skyrim's 10 years old, Garret? How old does that make you feel?
That actually kind of makes me feel, I'm not going to lie. I remember playing that in high school. I had it in high school. So, man, it's been so long. 10 years.
I know.
It's tough.
Of course, we got to break into the fun facts that I've gone ahead and selected for Skyrim. So let's start with that. So, of course, Skyrim, to what I just mentioned, was released worldwide on November 11th, 2011 on PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. It got a its first release called The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Special Edition on October 28th, 2016 on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It then received a VR version on November 17th, 2017 called The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim VR on PlayStation VR and PC. And then it's getting another re-release this year, Garrett. In fact, in a matter of weeks, you will have this in your hands. So the second re-release is called The Elder Scrolls Skyrim Anniversary Edition, and it'll be out on November 11th, 2021 on PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. So again, essentially 10 years later, we're getting another re-release of Skyrim. And not only that, it's also one of the only games that I know of that exists on Amazon Alexa, because they did do the Amazon Alexa version of Skyrim where you basically tell your character to move forward and you do your dragon shout, and Amazon, dragon shouts back at you.
That was I remember playing that. I remember the advertisement for that novelty game, and at first it was a joke. I was like, no, they're legitimately doing that. They're taking that meme of Skyrim putting everywhere on every device to the limit.
Yep.
And they did it on Alexa.
Well, it's fine. It only got, 2 re-releases before it, and then like a VR version, and now it's getting another re-release. But you know what? We need Skyrim on all the things, Garrett, because it's a great game, of course.
They're milking it.
So
they're stretching it.
So the game itself uses a proprietary engine called the Creation Engine that was designed specifically for Skyrim. Bethesda basically went on to use the same engine for Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. And with mixed results, especially on console. Of course. But we're going to talk about that when we kind of get to some of the later talk. I'm really curious to talk to you about the PlayStation 3 version of the game, which is interesting. It also received 3 DLC packs over his lifetime, Dawnguard, Hearthfire, and Dragonborn, which again, I think we'll talk about a little bit later under our discussion. But each of these, maybe it's not so much Hearthfire, but the other 2, Dawnguard and Dragonborn, really felt like almost like standalone expansions in a lot of ways.
Definitely were.
Almost like the Shuddering Isles,
the Shuddering Isles as well.
Yeah, the expansion for the Elder Scrolls 4, that kind of length, where they almost felt like like 15 to 20 hours of game right there, which was pretty cool as well.
Yeah,
and that's all I got for fun facts. So, Garrett, I know we talked about how you got into Skyrim on the very first episode, so I don't think we'll bore people so much with that, because I think because I know for you this was kind of like the springboard for you kind of getting into the Elder Scrolls franchise. But for those at home who have never played an Elder Scrolls game, what would you say to them to maybe entice them to check out Skyrim? Or do you think even that's where someone who's new to the franchise should even start? Because you have to remember, this is the first time we're really talking about the Elder Scrolls at length on this show. I wanted to talk about it because it's kind of hard to, especially since it's the 5th game in the series, there's a 5 predominantly in the title. Do people is this the type of game you would recommend for someone who's new to Elder Scrolls? What do you think?
If you're new to Elder Scrolls, I think Skyrim is a perfect entry point. It's probably the most accessible game, most you can probably get on any system you can think of. It has the most quality of life updates in the Elder Scrolls franchise, other than Elder Scrolls Online. I would say Elder Scrolls Skyrim is a very good pick. I think, and that's my entry point, of course, as you said, with Elder Scrolls, but also just like general with Western RPGs and really fantasy-like RPGs. Skyrim was my first one that opened me up into that side. And then ever since I played Witcher, I played Dragon Age, so on and so forth. To give just an introduction to the listener, the first person that is going into it, Skyrim is it's a very open type of exploration RPG. You can go any direction you want. It feels very Bethesda. It's a very Bethesda RPG where you go out into the world. So many quest lines to do. So many different skills, magic. You can do sneaking. You can do warrior. You can just go out front. You can pick factions. It's a huge sandbox to go through. That's pretty much it. You can get lost in it. Seriously, it's just a huge exploration to go through. What about you, Ryan?
And it's just one of those things to your point. I think it's probably, it's definitely the most accessible Elder Scrolls game, because the only other modern Elder Scrolls game that we have besides this, well, besides Blades on mobile, but we don't really count that, is the Elder Scrolls Online, which is an MMO. Yes. But I think that's actually even harder to get into than something like Skyrim, because I think there's a lot more. You're a lot more limited by some things in the MMO. The story I don't think is as good, and it's harder to play by yourself. Whereas, Skyrim, for the most part, you can take your time and kind of really just savor it at your heart's desire and kind of play it at your own pace. Whereas, again, like MMOs, you're not always able to do that unless you're a certain MMOs. So, and otherwise, if you went before this too, like it's one of those things, like it's kind of like Final Fantasy in a lot of ways. Sure, there are events that kind of tie together in the Elder Scrolls universe, but like none of the games are really connected in any deep way, especially because like most of them take place like many, many, many years apart. Like this is like close to like 500 years, I think, difference between kind of the last game, and they're kind of like the timeline's kind of all over the place for Elder Scrolls games in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think that for the most part, you can just go into this without having to worry about all the other stuff and go into it. The fact that they even tie a number to these games anymore, Garrett, is just kind of silly to me. Like they could almost just call it the Elder Scrolls and then blank. It's like whatever realm
something
they're
else.
going to.
Just exactly.
Yeah, because the trick is with all the Elder Scrolls games, they always name it with the naming convention of like the Elder Scrolls, then number, and then whatever place you're going to. So Skyrim is the place this is set in Tamriel, which is the bigger continent that the Elder Scrolls takes place in. It also was cool to have like a Norse kind of game where we didn't really have like a lot of these kinds of games at the time either that took place in this like
that's true,
almost like frigid fantasy environment. I mean, I think we've seen a lot more of them now, especially at like when movies like Thor, for example, kind of rose to prominence. Like we started to see more stuff go in that direction, like God of War and some other stuff. But I think that when it came out, it was a really unique game. But yeah, that's really interesting. But yeah, otherwise, as far as my history with Elder Scrolls, again, I talked about it on an earlier episode, but I have basically played all of the Elder Scrolls games up except for the first two. So I mean, I played Morrowind, I played Oblivion, I played Skyrim, I've played Blades. Believe it or not, it was not. It's not a very good game, but it exists. And I played Elder Scrolls Online. And likewise, Garrett. So you played Blades. How since this was your introduction to Elder Scrolls, did this make you want to go and play the other games? I'm curious.
I did not really get into the other games. I remember actually, I didn't know it was Oblivion, but I remember going to my friend's place and he played Oblivion itself. And I was actually very intrigued what that game was. I just never asked what the game was or really got into it. It was really just Skyrim. And then I kind of did not go backwards from there. First of all, I only had the 360, so yeah, I could have gotten Oblivion.
Yep.
But I didn't really get into it that much. I remember playing maybe the first hour of it. I'm like, I'm just not feeling it compared to Skyrim. I guess I got a little bit spoiled.
But you can break out of prison with Patrick Stewart. Like, what's not to like, Garrett?
A lot of different things on that UI. It was a little messy. I remember it was a little bit more, I don't know, cartoonish, I guess you could say. And
yeah, it definitely was. Like it wasn't like as realistically graphically styled as Skyrim was. That's for sure.
Or I think a good term is grounded.
Right.
I feel like Skyrim was the first time I was getting lost in something that felt, I wouldn't say real, but like it was merging that real life aspect with fantasy. And they did a very good job of mixing that together with this game. There's so many different things to do in Skyrim, Ryan. Where to start?
So we should probably start really quickly with like the story synopsis and kind of like the bird's eye view of what you're actually doing in this game. And we're going to go through this very quickly because it's an Elder Scrolls game. The stories like the Elder Scrolls games, for those that have never played them or are new to the series, are more about like little stories in the place that you're in, and not so much the big overarching narrative. All the games have a big overarching narrative of some kind, but for the most part, it takes place. It only takes that's like 5 or 10 hours of your experience
maximum.
Whereas you're going on and playing for in Garrett's case, for example, hundreds of hours. So basically in this game, you play as a random prisoner who's basically, captured at the border for something. They don't really elaborate too much.
Let's see.
And you're carried in a wagon. Basically, you're on your way to basically be executed because you got mixed in with a bunch of, rebels that are basically trying to rebel against the Imperials who have come in and kind of claimed Skyrim for their own. Whereas kind of, I'm blanking on the name of them, but they're essentially the rebels.
The Nords or
no,
no, that's the race. The
Stormcloaks. That's
Stormcloaks.
So the Stormcloaks are kind of like the traditional rulers of Skyrim versus the Imperials, which is this allied nation coming from Tamriel, who basically come to take over Skyrim, and because they're trying to take over all of Tamriel essentially. So
trying to make them more civilized, or it's like colonizing in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're basically being taken to being executed. And as your head is about to chop off, because your head, you basically kneel down on the little execution block to get beheaded. A dragon swoops in and attacks the place, and you basically escape from there. But you find out that you are, in fact, the Dragonborn, and you're one of the only people in the world that can kill dragons, because you can essentially absorb the dragon spirit into yourself, and you can actually gain their powers. Because essentially, if you kill a dragon in Skyrim, it'll just come back. That's kind of how it works, especially with certain dragons. Yeah. Not all the dragons are like that, but like more the elder dragons are kind of that way. And basically you have to do battle with this big elder dragon whose name I'm blanking on, because again, that's how much the story really matters in this game.
Oh, I forgot about the dragon's name too.
Yeah. Man, I spun his 3D model so many times in the loading screen that you'd think I'd remember.
Yeah, I know, right?
But no, so for the most part, you're just going to go kill this big elder dragon, and you're killing other dragons to kind of get more powers to defeat them, and that's kind of how it goes. That's how the story goes, and that's all you pretty much need to know about it. Because again, the story, that's the main narrative for Skyrim. It's fine. It exists.
You get allies. You get characters together.
You try and bring the Stormcloaks and the Imperials together, and they do temporarily.
There's some random spirits. There's a spirit world, apparently. I remember that part. Yeah. I just remember not paying attention to the story the first time too. Like I just did not care whatsoever. The very beginning, I just want to go back. The iconic scene. I probably played that so many times. I haven't really finished like Skyrim in general a lot, but I've started Skyrim at least 15 to 20 times. I remember that scene so much, and distinctly remember there's two different routes to go through that first level too. Yeah.
So, and you either can escape with an Imperial or a Stormcloak, depending on which way you go. And also that scene's been parodied in so many different things. In fact, the most recent one that I remember that really just blew my mind was, have you ever heard of the show Pop Team Epic?
No, Garret? I haven't. Sorry.
So it's this anime parody show where they parody a bunch of stuff, and it's like very wacky and kind of out there. And they did like an episode where they parodied the beginning of Skyrim, and it was amazing. So if you've ever wanted to see like an anime version of that intro, from like an actual like Japanese development studio, it's amazing how they did it.
That sounds pretty good.
So it's just one of those things that. It's just hilarious how many people have actually, taken that and kind of run with it. And I mean, plus with so many games coming out after Skyrim, you've also seen kind of that influence on a lot of different games as well as far as like how the opening starts and whatnot. And you kind of go from there. But the story again doesn't really matter that much, which is why again, we're not going to go into too many details about it. And then again, if you're playing Elder Scrolls, you're probably not playing it for the story, or if you are, you're going to learn very quickly that the story's not that impressive. In fact, I was very surprised this time around with Skyrim, because it took me way less time to beat the main story in this than something like Oblivion, because Oblivion's main story takes you about 10 to 15 hours to finish, whereas you can finish it in 5 hours, essentially.
You can mainline that and just be done.
And just be like, I rolled credits on Skyrim. I don't know why how long to beat says it's going to take me 100 hours to beat this when I beat it in 5 hours. But,
Exactly.
Or likewise, if you could watch a Skyrim speedrun, Garrett, I don't know if you've ever watched those before. Where
I haven't before. That sounds interesting.
I think like the top time is like 20 minutes for this game.
Goodness gracious. How do you do that?
I mean, just... a lot
have
of
to look at these videos.
Yeah,
a
I
lot of
know
skipping.
with Oblivion specifically, if you exit out of a certain area in the dungeon, it brings you automatically to the final battle in Oblivion, and then you just kill the final boss and it ends. So, which is hilarious. So yeah, there's all kinds of silly things. But of course, we should probably talk about the meat and the potatoes of Skyrim, and that's all the side stuff, all the things that you're going to be doing. So the first thing you're going to notice when you pick up Skyrim for the very first time is if you open your map, you're going to see a whole bunch of like stuff on the map that just kind of appears, and pretty much you can just go and just do whatever you want essentially in this game. If you go to towns, for example, and talk to some of the townspeople, you'll sometimes get side quests from them, and some of them can be very minor things like delivering a letter to this girl, basically that's like a forged letter saying, your boyfriend's dead, so she can go get with this guy that basically forged the letter, to other things where it's like, there's a dungeon over there on the hill and there's skeletons, go kill them, kind of thing. Yes. So they kind of range all over the place, but some of the little side stories are really interesting. Garret, is there like a side mission in particular you remember from Skyrim that kind of comes to mind as like one of your favorite missions?
Well, one of my favorite ones, I remember going into, I think it was Solitude, the towns up north. That was the Imperial capital. The wackiest thing is the Daedra. I'm sure you know what the Daedra are, is a bunch of demon gods messing with people. And I was transported randomly into like a psychedelic dream of another person's mind. I had to go like 3 or 4 different trials. It was the wackiest quest I've ever been on with Skyrim. So that was one of them. And I get that. What was it? The Jabberwocky. It's like a staff that like randomly spawns stuff out of nowhere. And actually is pretty effective for a good time. There was another one. It was in Falkreath, which is out west where the Dwemer mining are. Man, I can't believe I'm regurgitating this out of my mind. But basically, you go there and you're just out drinking or whatever with this guy, and you're doing a drinking contest, and you figure out he's a Daedra as well, and he like kind of like transfer you randomly off a certain town. You lose all your stuff. It's just like, yeah, I think the Daedra is the one that messed me up the much, and it reminds me a lot. That stood out to me a lot for sure. What about you?
Nice. Yeah, for me, as far as the side quests are concerned, the only one that was like super memorable to me in Skyrim, and maybe it's just because I didn't play it as much, or it's maybe not as fresh in my mind because I haven't played it in a long time, was the Fighters Guild in particular, because one of the things I love about their quest line is being able to unlock the ability to change into a werewolf, which is
really
like one of my favorite things in the game to do.
Okay, cool.
But how they go about telling you the fact that they're werewolves, because they kind of dance around it for a little bit before they eventually reveal it to you, because it just kind of comes out of nowhere, and then you get basically offered the option to become a werewolf when the quest completes, and kind of how the call comes about, and who they're in conflict with, I think is like super interesting and cool. Another quest line that I really liked as well is also kind of a carryover and kind of almost like a sequel to a quest line from Oblivion, which was the Dark Brotherhood quest line, which is the
I love that
Guild of
very
Assassins, essentially, where I just love that all the creative ways they have to like they tell you to basically kill people is just really interesting. Like you have to, some of the enemies, you got to kill them with poison or make it look like an accident. For example, like by pushing this rock on top of this dude's head while he sits in a chair or stuff like that. Like I thought all that stuff was like really interesting and cool. It made you think about like different ways of defeating enemies in the game that it's like outside the box in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Plus I love playing stealth. So I love that a lot of those missions kind of revolved around stealth. And I was able to use some more of my stealth attributes a lot more. But I don't know, with a lot of the random side quests in Skyrim, there aren't too many that really come to mind as like big standouts for me personally. It's more like, believe it or not, I had more of those moments in Oblivion because I spent so much more time with that game. And again, it's like from that game, I've talked about it before many times, but the mission where like you have to save this painter who's sucked into his own painting by going into the painting, and you're running around this world that's like totally like weird, like Picasso, like hand paint, like weird painted. world is like so cool and memorable. So I know there were more things like that in Oblivion for me personally that I was really attached to, but I think that actually all of the guild quest lines in this game in particular were actually really well done. And those are the ones that were actually most memorable to me. Even the mage quest line, which I didn't really love at first, but I liked the direction it went in kind of midway through the story.
I love the ending of that quest storyline for sure. To add on the Dark Brotherhood, that was very memorable to me as well. That actually got me into sneaking. Okay. And like sneaking video games like Dishonored. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the Dark Brotherhood from Skyrim. And it's like, I'm really getting into this. Yeah. It's kind of fascinating how many, I mean, it is an RPG, but how many kind of genres you can like fit into an open world sandbox. They did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was so interesting. So speaking of, your skills, we should probably dive into some of the mechanics as we always do on
of course
each deep dive. And one of the biggest mechanics in the Elder Scrolls series, not just with this game, but it was actually really well implemented, I think, at this game, is the leveling system and how it's different from a lot of other games, because for the most part, you level all, like there's like 20 or 30 different skill lines, and you level each one of them individually, and they level as you do things. So as you run, you can build up stamina, or as you take damage, you build up your armor skills, depending on what armor you're wearing. Or the more you sneak around, you build up your stealth skill, or things like that. The more you lockpick things, you build up your lockpicking. Like all that, I think has always been like super engaging for with the Elder Scrolls games, and I've always really liked that leveling system, especially because it kind of gives you the true freedom to kind of customize things how you want to. And again, for someone like me who likes to play stealth, it was cool to be able to play like a first person, stealth RPG for like 100 hours or so, and just sneaking around and backstabbing people. Like I thought that was super cool. And then I was able to build up my character while also using some magic and some bow and arrow skills and stuff like that, and really mix your max your abilities depending on what is going on in the situation around you. In fact, Garrett, since I talked about how I'm always build a stealthy character, how do you usually build like your Elder Scrolls character? Like, do you go more magic-y or sword fighty?
So the first run that I did, no joke, it was a one-handed sword and healing on the left. And let me tell you how OP that was. OP. It like I could just walk into like a dungeon of any kind and just smack around all the monsters and stuff like that. Pretty easy. And then just heal yourself on the left hand. That's what I normally go towards. I actually tried out beginning with like sneaking or other types of things like magic, and it's actually quite harder for me compared to what I'm comfortable with, which is that one-handed or two-handed one sword skill set. I remember choosing my skills very carefully the first time I did this game, and it was my combat was heavy armor, one-handed sword skills. I was very into smithing, so I did a lot of smithing and a lot of enchanting as well. Nice. So I was able to get the best heavy armor I could get and be basically a tank while healing myself, while like destroying people with my enchanted one-sworded weapon. So
essentially you were like a paladin in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes, very much so. And then what I really like about Skyrim is that it's not a min-max situation. It is a max situation. You progress everything that you want. And so when I was kind of done with one-handed swords, I went to bows. I went to sneaking. I went to two-handed. I did basically everything else magic after I was kind of done with the one-handed sword. So it kind of extended the lifespan of the game, going into those other skills and figuring out what to do. So.
Plus, it encourages you to try new things. So you're not just doing the same thing all the time in a lot of ways, especially if you're not finding like your one-handed skill progressing very far because it's so high up, for example. It make you want to try something else and kind of play around with some of the other systems in the games. And I thought that's really cool. Although, Garrett, you sound like it makes it sound OP, but you don't know what it's like to turn into a werewolf, go around and just destroy everyone in a dungeon, because that is like super overpowered in certain areas.
I've heard.
But that's one of the things I've always liked about that ability, giving you an ability like that too, because like there's a cost to that too. I mean, you can't just use it all the time. It's got like a really long cooldown, and there are some negative things that come along with that as well. Yes. But I do like the idea that it kind of gives you that option to do something like that. Likewise, you can also become a vampire in this, just like in, typical Elder Scrolls fashion, and same deal with being a vampire. You become stupidly overpowered with your skills, and you get some crazy overpowered skills depending on how far into vampirism you are. But the downside is like you can't go out in the daylight, or if you do, you take damage, or people are afraid of you, so you can't earn certain side quests because they don't want to give them to a vampire that's just going to suck their blood when they turn around. Yeah. So like I love kind of that dynamic and how the world kind of reacts around reacts to you being like that. Like I thought that was a really cool mechanic. So
I personally did not actually do either races, either werewolf or vampire. I did not want to have that power because I was always worried about those negative side effects. And I was like, nah, I just want to create my own way. Those sounds OP. It very much sounds overpowered, but I did not choose either one.
Well, it's not just that too. Like I chose the werewolf for the fantasy as well, because like how often do you get to play a werewolf in a game? Like that hasn't happened very often.
Very
at all.
rarely.
Like, the one that always comes to mind when I always think back is like Werewolf, the last warrior on the NES, which is an old school like side-scrolling beat 'em up game where you play as a werewolf, or something like Altered Beast, where you get like the on certain levels you can turn into a wolf man. But like besides that, like when else do you get to be a werewolf in a game? Like how cool is that? So and they brought that back from Morrowind, because that was an option in Morrowind, but in Oblivion you could only become a vampire and not a werewolf, which is weird.
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I love that aspect. But one of the other mechanics we should talk about, Garrett, if you're going to play this on console, is the old school mechanics of playing on PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360. For example, if you play on PlayStation 3, there's a big error with the game that even after hundreds of patches to the game, and it's not actually 100 patches. I'm just spitballing a number here because there are a lot of patches for that version. But basically, when the save file exceeds a certain file size, it basically breaks the game and makes it so it's unplayable. Like the game runs at 3 frames per second. And that usually happens either by you progressing a certain length in the game, by completing enough objectives, or if you carry enough items on you, such as if you go and pick up like 250 cheese wheels and carry them around with you, and then you just roll them down a hill, that you're going to get to that file size pretty quickly. Just because of the way it allocates things. So the console versions, if you're ever going to Garrett's point, jumping into the Elder Scrolls 5 for the first time, don't play those versions of the games. I mean, the 360 version's not as bad. It actually certainly runs better.
Actually.
it runs better than the PlayStation 3 version, but they're both not great versions. Definitely play either the special edition that came out a couple years ago, back in 2016. Oh God, I can't believe I looked at the data. I can't believe it's been 5 years since that came out. Oh my God.
Right? It felt so new, but like that release date is midpoint now. It's 5 years from the original release date into now.
God,
it's kind of crazy.
And then the anniversary edition that's coming out, in a week and a half from the time you're listening to this. So definitely stick with those versions. But I just remember seeing videos online of just the PlayStation 3 version just chugging and running at like 3 or 4 frames per second.
Right. I heard that was garbage. My story, I don't know if I mentioned this in the podcast, but my story was Skyrim. I did a playthrough, my first playthrough on 360, and I had an external memory card. I had a USB stick actually to plug it in there. And I played maybe like 80 hours or something like that. I was getting very far. Like, I'm like, oh man, I'm almost finished. I'm almost to the end here. And my game crashed. And I tried to load it back up. It was like file save corrupted.
Oh no.
And I'm like, are you serious right now? Took a little break, probably like 6 months or something like that. I went back into it, restarted a whole character, went through it again. I think I a little bit less time, but I was pretty far in. Same thing happened again on my 360. File save corrupted. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done until I get the PC version or a new version comes out or something like that. So,
oh my God,
a little bit bitter about that.
I'm so sorry.
I still enjoy my memories with Skyrim.
Maybe that was just the game's way of telling you, Garrett, you've played enough. Please stop. You're killing us.
You're done.
Yeah. You've seen everything you need to see in this game. We're just going to end it for you.
No, I rather own all 9 different versions of the game and keep playing the beginning scene.
That doesn't surprise me, Garrett. I'm not surprised by this. Even the VR version?
I don't do VR, but I definitely have. I definitely have the Xbox, Switch, PC. I don't think I have the PlayStation 4 one though. Maybe I should get it, but
maybe
I want to get the platinum. I'm actually very close to get the 1,000 achievements of this game, and of course, file save got corrupted.
That takes a long time. That takes a long time.
It does. Yeah.
Just like I did that for Oblivion. Like I got all 1,000 achievement points for that, plus all the achievement points for Shivering Isles, and that took me 200 hours of in-game time, like according to the in-game clock. So there you go. But other mechanics in the game, one of the new things they added that we talked about a little bit when talking about the story are the dragon shouts, which are new. You basically find them either in caves or by killing certain dragons, and they'll usually grant you certain abilities that are fine. They're not amazing, I don't think.
Yeah, they're okay.
Yeah, I think you actually get way more overpowered stuff like outside of the dragon shouts throughout the game, especially like some of the later magical spells and stuff like that are just ridiculous. So it's definitely not. It's like it's a nice thing to have like that's on a cooldown, but like it doesn't use any of your resources. But you have to use some of them to progress through the story. So there is that available to, or on certain side quests. Because
that's true.
Like you have to use some of them, for example, to either like unlock specific doors or get you into specific areas. So that's one of the reasons why the dragon shouts are there. Also, you kill dragons in this game, Garrett. I don't know if you knew that.
You do.
Which is new to the Elder Scrolls games. Like they didn't do this in any of the other games. Like this is the only place where dragons kind of exist in this universe. And that like each of the dragon fights, I always found were like really epic and cool. Like even though like sometimes like it's tough to shoot them in the air with the bow and arrow, so you kind of have to wait for them to come down in order to whack them.
That was kind of tough. Yeah.
But they were really cool, I think. Like I think they were all really well done in this game.
I think the combat of this game, it's not very complex at all. It's not very crafty.
You pretty much whack stuff in the face.
You really just whack stuff in the face and some damage goes down. So dragons, although I felt very important and it's very crucial and it was invigorating. When I look back at it, I was like, I just feel like I'm just a weird man, just wavering my arms all around, trying to even come contact with this dragon that swoops around. They actually did a pretty good job of like, hey, the dragon swoops around, comes down, breathes fire at you. So, yeah.
And each dragon's a little bit different because some of the dragons have different abilities and stuff like that too. So I always really enjoyed fighting the dragons in this game, which I think were the highlights of some of the combat because to your point, Garrett, the combat's not super complex. But there's a lot of like interesting enemies in the game as well. But then there are some like really annoyingly tough ones, especially if you're under leveled. Like I remember running into a troll for the first time down by the river and getting like punched, like one-shotted in the face by just getting
you get
punched.
destroyed.
Or the very first time you run into giants, Garrett, where they hit you so hard you fly into the stratosphere.
I remember that. It took forever for that death animation. It was like at least 2 minutes.
It would make you wait. Every time.
It was like, you're going to see your dead body hit the ground before we reload this game. It was pretty funny. I really enjoyed the dungeons. I don't know if you're about to speak about that.
That's what I was going to transition to. One of the enemy types that I don't really love in one of the dungeons that I have to give a shout out to, which of course is just one of the most memorable things about the dungeons in a lot of ways, are like some of the dwarven robotic enemies in some of the dungeons, mainly because like maybe it was just the strategies I would employ against them where they were like highly resistant to a lot of different types of weaponry, or they just would have like gigantic health pools and would take forever to kill. And I'm someone who's always said that I don't love gigantic health pools on enemies in games. Like basically giving you an excuse to just whack away at it for like 5 minutes. Like I don't really love that kind of thing. But to your point, I think a lot of the dungeons are really well done and interesting and diverse too, because you go to a bunch of, even though you're in like a frozen tundra like place, you'd be surprised how many different types of dungeons you go to, and they don't all
pretty
feel
diverse.
the same. Although they are all for the most part are underground, so you're not really doing like outdoor dungeons or anything like that. But I thought they were really interesting. What do you have a favorite, Garrett? What do you think about the dungeons in this game?
I mean, I don't have a favorite off the top of my head. I remember just going endlessly to these dungeons. I was always curious about the one dungeon to the next, and you would find these things in any way, shape, or form. You could be pretty close to the map. You could hear a sighting in a town. It could be in a quest line. Each dungeon had its own surprise, and I thought every one of them was unique. I think the biggest thing I really liked about the dungeons was getting to the more important dungeons with the dragon priests and fending off those was really epic. And actually collecting those masks was like one of my favorite things to do. It was like, oh my gosh, I almost got every single mask in my collection. So I really enjoyed the dungeon rating inside this game for sure. Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty cool. Some of them are really long too, but luckily you do have a lot of, first of all, you can save anywhere, which is nice. And you have a lot of good options. So, you don't have to feel like you have to do them all in, one sitting or anything like that. And I think the dungeon design in this is pretty good. Definitely better than Oblivion's dungeon design, because a lot of the dungeons in that game kind of felt kind of samey. But again, like I felt like a lot of the fun I had in Oblivion wasn't in the dungeons. It was kind of like exploring the world in a lot more rather than being in the dungeons themselves. Whereas in this game, I felt almost the opposite, where like the world was interesting like on the outside, but the dungeons were probably a little more interesting than the outside world, if that makes any sense.
A lot of layers to this game, man. Not even just dungeons, but like underground mines, and you talked about the Dwarven, but also like the different races down below. There's a lore about I think it was like the White Elves or something like that turned into a different race. I forgot exactly what it was, but I remember just going more and more into the lore of it, and you just peel back layer by layer, and it's all the more interesting in this game. Yeah. So.
Plus, you get to learn more about a lot of races that don't exist in the other realms that you haven't seen in previous games that are kind of like exclusively part of Skyrim in particular. So that's where you get a lot of lore for the rest of the game, which is pretty cool. So beyond that, I think we've covered most of the mechanics in Skyrim anyways. There's also you've got a companion system as well, but I usually just end up killing off my companion instead because it's more fun to just brutally murder them after they've sworn allegiance to me. Because I'm just evil.
You're brutal.
You've also got a housing system in this game, of course, where you can buy a house and you can decorate your house. In fact, the Hearthfire expansion was mostly like a house expansion in a lot of ways. They added a lot of extra stuff in the DLC to housing, which is pretty cool. So if you're like the person that likes to decorate, you can do that. Or, you can have your companion or your husband or wife kind of live in the house with you if you want.
I had a wife and a daughter. It was pretty interesting to play house like that.
Yeah, I had them Skyrim too until I murdered them, Garrett.
Oh. See, that's an interesting character. So
I play chaotic evil characters, Garrett. That's just how it is.
Oh, okay. You were about to say chaotic neutral. I'm like, that's definitely not neutral.
No, I know. You know where I was going with it, though. But,
oh, man.
But yeah, so those are some of the mechanics. And also, speaking of DLC, the Dawn Card expansion actually brought in some new mechanics as far as werewolves and vampires, because it fully fleshed out those systems. Because that whole expansion was about basically this war between like ancient vampires and these vampire hunters, which were werewolves. And you essentially choose one side or the other to kind of side with. And if you for example, if you side with the werewolves, you can get some extra abilities as a werewolf, which was really interesting. Or likewise, if you join the vampires, you could become like an ancient vampire with all kinds of like crazy sick abilities, but you also had some crazy downsides if you went with it. And I thought that was pretty cool, and kind of the extra layer it added to some of the gameplay if you decided to pick a side there. Of course, you can actually play it and not actually choose a side if you want to as well, and kind of go from there. And then the Dragonborn DLC, I actually never really got to. So I don't really know too much about this one, but I know you're surprised, Garrett. So did you play it?
Oh yeah, this was by far my favorite DLC. I like Dawnguard. It was pretty interesting. I actually liked the story a lot more. Yeah, and Dawnguard versus the main Skyrim one. But yeah, I think what was the DLC called?
Dragonborn.
I'm sorry, Dragonborn. That's it. Yes. So the story was fine. It was the sandbox. I forgot which island you go to, but you revisit an old piece of land next to Skyrim, and there's an old Dragonborn that's being revived by a cult, and you get into the craziest sandbox areas in that one. Like they thought of the craziest like different abilities and powers, and I don't know, they just went off the wall with like what you typically do with DLC. So I remember that being memorable, and riding the dragons themselves. Well, riding the dragons was just okay. Like the mechanics was really rough. I remember just doing it once, and I'm like, okay, this is cool, but I'm not actually flying the dragon at
Especially
all.
Especially like the game was not built around that. And not
really
only that, but that's something weird to throw in after like, you know, playing for 100 hours or 200 hours or however long you'd spent with the game at that point to then throw in there, especially because you couldn't really use it kind of in the main game in like a really good way or anything like that. So yeah, I would imagine that makes a lot of sense. Why?
Yeah. So, but it's a completely separate land.
Right.
It reminded me of that one Fallout 4 DLC, the Big Harbor Island or whatever.
Yeah, Port Lookout, I think, something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, something like that. Where you just go off to a completely separate land, and it has its own sandbox, and it has its own events and stuff like that. So yeah.
But that's done a lot that a lot with their DLC. Like they did that with like most of the Fallout 3 pieces of DLC. They did that with the Shivering Isles for Oblivion, and then they did that here with Dragonborn, which is pretty cool. So yeah, all 3 of the DLC packs as well are included in all the newer versions of the game. So if you have the special edition, it's just woven into the experience, and you almost don't even know you're doing them when you get there. Versus if you go back and play on 360 or PS3, it's a little bit of a different experience. But as far as everything else, I think we've covered most of the things that we probably wanted to cover about Skyrim, unless there's something I'm forgetting, Garrett. So we should maybe move to kind of, you know, overall thoughts on Skyrim, of course. Should people go play Skyrim now, Garrett? Do you think it holds up? What do you think?
I mean, the Skyrim Anniversary Edition is coming up. So if you want to wait for that, you can. I see it on sale constantly. Like I got it on Steam for like $10 or something like that, like a couple years back. I got it on Xbox via Game Pass. It's on Game Pass with the special edition. Also, I just want to mention the Anniversary Edition. It looks fine, but I don't think it's necessary to have that edition. Right. If you want to settle with the special edition, that's totally fine. You'll get a really good Skyrim experience. I think the Anniversary Edition, the only thing that they're really doing is adding mods, adding certified refurbished mods into the game to make it spruce it up a little bit, but it's definitely not going to change what the game is going to be.
You know, and I know that's a big deal for some people. Like some people really love mods, especially because the original version of the games did not have mod support. We really didn't have console mod support for any of Bethesda's games until Fallout 4. But I think it'll be interesting for that. But I'm just, you know, curious to see what this is going to look like. And I guess we don't have a long wait to find out, because it'll be out soon. And I'm pretty sure this will probably end up being on Game Pass. So maybe I check it out and, you know, start a new character and go through that beginning again, Garrett. If nothing else, just to do the beginning one more time to see, or make sure to walk up to the guard and see if he got shot in the knee with an arrow. That's why he became a guard. But last thing I wanted to touch on before we go, because I agree with you. I actually think, because I talked about this on the Roundabout last year, which was our Xbox 360 focus show over on the Xbox Drive. I think Skyrim actually holds up pretty well. So I definitely think it's worth going back and playing today for sure, to your point. But last thing I want to touch on real quick is that we don't know anything about Elder Scrolls 6 yet, Garrett. We know it's coming. We know it's a game that exists because we know it's coming after Starfield, which comes out next year. So obviously we're still assuming this is probably like a 2024, 2025 game at this point.
At this point, maybe, man, it's going to be like a very late Xbox Series X PS5 game. Maybe. I don't have hopes for this game ever coming to light until maybe late next year, 2023.
That's way too generous. I actually think it's further out than that. Like it's probably 2025. So
well, no, I'm saying like the next time we see it, like announcements or gameplay or any information about it. Yeah, no, they're totally all hands on deck with Starfield, which they should. I think they kind of need to redeem from Fallout 7. It was 4 and 76, really.
Well, plus it's cool to just see them finally do a new IP that's like not licensed from someone else, or not an Elder Scrolls game, because that studio has been doing just Elder Scrolls and Fallout for decades now. So they haven't really done anything else besides that. But the real question is then, since we've been talking about some of the mechanics and some of the things that made Skyrim special, as well as some of the complaints about it, what do you want to maybe see them do with Elder Scrolls 6? Is there any, like, do we have like a list that we're starting to put together and tally of like, here's the checklist of things we want in this game, Garrett? What do you think?
Well, I think Bethesda knows the positives of Skyrim. I think Todd Howard absolutely knows what the charm is coming out of Skyrim, and he definitely wants to transfer that charm and positivity and exploration over to Elder Scrolls 6. I just think they can't have that bleeding mark of bugs in their game like what we saw with Cyberpunk, with that whole timeline that just totally destroyed CD Projekt Red's reputation. They need to come back, and I think Starfield will prove a point. I think if that game's very solid, I think they're proving a point that they're turning it around. So I think the same for Elder Scrolls 6. Again, you don't need maybe the size of Skyrim is fine, but you really don't need bigger than that. Like,
if anything, certain games that have come out recently from certain companies, Ubisoft, have maybe taught us that maybe not every game world needs to be, the size of the United States of America. You don't need to go that far. or even something like the Assassin's Creed Odyssey map. Sure, I loved Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but that map in particular, way too big. So I don't think every game needs to go in that direction. I would love a smaller map with more things to do than a larger map with more open space and less things to do, if that makes any sense.
I agree. I think if you have that type of space, you have to justify why you have that space. Whereas I feel like, Assassin's Creed, no bad against them or whatever, but they're amazing games. But you know what you're getting into with a Ubisoft template game. It is repetitive. You're doing the same things. You're getting a little bit more powerful, but you're really doing the same things. So just justify the space that you're in, and you can make it however big or small you want. And I think Bethesda knows that. Yeah. And I hope that becomes clear with Elder Scrolls 6. But I am very excited with what's the other Obsidian making their new what was the game? Avowed. That's it. I'm very interested to see that as well. Very heavily inspired by Skyrim for sure. So
especially with how good like the Outer Worlds was, or Fallout New Vegas. Like I'd love, especially like they've done multiple games in that like Fallout style. Now seeing them do like an Elder Scrolls like game, I think is going to be really refreshing for them. So I think Elder Scrolls 6, I think is going to have a lot to live up to when it eventually comes out, in 4 or 5 years from now. Because also we've had so many other like really awesome Western RPGs since then. We had The Witcher 3. We've had a bunch of other games that do this fantasy style that kind of do what the Elder Scrolls does, but maybe without all the bugs. So you're right on the point that it has to be bug free. And honestly, as long as it's free from microtransactions and it feels properly balanced and it's not super buggy, I think it's probably going to be fun. So I think we're maybe a little early to give it a definitive list of here's all the things we need from it yet, but I think we'll kind of save that. We're going to pin in that conversation for when they actually announce where it takes place, because we just don't know where Elder Scrolls 6 takes place, like what continent it's in. But then when they tell us that, I think we can start putting together like, here's like the type of things we want to see in there, what type of mechanics are in there. Like, I think we can start building that list then. But I think this kind of wraps our conversation about the Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, one of Garrett's favorite RPGs of all time. I'm so happy.
I'm going to go back. I'll probably play it more on my Switch. Actually, that's a great version of
For a second
Skyrim,
there, I thought you were going to say you were
Switch.
going to go back to Alexa and go ask her to play some Skyrim instead.
Oh, yeah. No, I should do that, actually.
My God.
I have Alexa right there.
Well, before we go, Garrett, plug Skull.
You can follow me on Twitter at Bland Explosion, and I'm also the co-host to Nintendo Shack, part of the Play Some Video Games podcast network. You can support them over at patreon.com/PSVG, and we're live on Thursday nights at twitch.tv/PSVG. And yes, go support our Extra Life funding page. I think it's PSVG of some kind in the
It'll be in the
name.
show notes. You can click the link.
It'll be in the show notes. Just go there. I know some of them are going to Rome, New York as well to meet up with Sean. So super cool.
Very nice, my friend. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at YouMeCaprice, on YouTube at youtube.com/YouMeCapri, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the 23rd level of the RPG Cave, and we're out.
Bye-bye.
The RPG Cave's mana is fueled by patrons over at patreon.com/YouMeCapri. And I want to say thanks to each and every one of our Patreon supporters for all of your support throughout the years, as well as supporting our independent content. And let's start by thanking our premium producers, Dallas Ford, Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team, and Jonathan Brown. You can find his content over at youtube.com/PM Entertainment. Our platinum producers, Robbie Bobby Mailer and Trucker Sloth, and our gold members, Argo, Brendan Myers, Dallas Robbins, Emily O'Kelly, Heather Boney, James Johnson, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Benji Kong, Marcus O'Neill, RJ Kern, Dano, Skinny Matt, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, Foolish Fuji, and Xavier Reyes. Thank you all for all of your support,